From 1929 to 1931, Malone fed intelligence about Capone that would culminate in the historic conviction of the nation's most notorious mob boss, who again wasn't Elliot Ness, it was Michael Malone. Here, in the United States rather, we didn't kill agents. But back in Capone's day, they killed everybody. It would have been very dangerous for him. He probably would have gotten killed if they would have found out who he was.
I walk in redemption.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end, extremely blessed. And as always, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to God for that. Now, as you can see, I'm not in my home studio. I'm actually in Rome and visited the Vatican today. Amazing, but I've been in Romania first, then Croatia. Beautiful, beautiful country, Croatia. Have to say that. Now I'm in Rome for a couple of days and then heading to the wine country here. What could I tell you? It's been a wonderful time for us so far. So what are we going to talk about today? You know, interestingly enough, I missed this last week. I would have gotten into it. I know you people don't all like the politics. I do a lot of it on Rumble. The viewers love it there, and they certainly chime in. We're not going to do that here. But I was thinking about the DNC happening in the city of Chicago. And I'm sorry, people, but, you know, verified throughout history that the biggest mobs in the world are always the government, you know, and it's turning out that the United States, which was, you know, I would have to say probably the most legit government out of all of them. And I'm thinking about Chicago, the DNC holding their convention there. You know, how appropriate was that, Chicago being a big mobbed up city, as we know. So I was thinking of Al Capone and thinking about his days back there. And you know what I've said about Al Capone and all of the mafia? And that is that it was prohibition, the federal government, that made the mafia strong in this country. That's the truth. Before that, there were a bunch of gangs trying to earn a living, scraping things out, doing the things that they did on the street. But the big, big, big money came during Prohibition for that 10 or 12 years that they ran all of these speakeasies, all of these bootlegging operations. That was the time. And by the way, you know, while I'm talking about that, I can say this. There is an extension of the mob, if you want to look at me as a former mobster, right now in the city of Chicago and the surrounding areas, because Franzese wine is now selling there and doing extremely well, by the way. And the stores that we're in, Mariano's, all over Chicago, very famous place, great market, one of the Kroger stores. Then we're in Deli for You, Shop and Save Market, Schaefer's Fine Wine and Spirits. So all of those stores, if you want Franzese wine, you want a little taste of the mob, you can go and pick up our wine. And you know what? It's doing very well, not only in the city of Chicago, but in cities throughout the country. Pretty soon we're going to be a global brand. Enough of that. Let's get into today's stuff. I saw a very interesting article, and it's about Capone. And you know, there's never enough to say about Al Capone, it seems. He is without a doubt the most, you know, infamous mobster of our time here in America. You can make an argument that John Gotti, and recently, within the last, 10, 20 years, obviously it's been Gotti. He's been all over the headlines. They can't stop doing things about him, documentaries, so on and so forth. His name still, garners a lot of interest. But Capone, 80 years after his death, is still the main mobster. Every time they name the main guys, Capone comes up as the main guy. And where was all his infamy? It was in the city of Chicago. Originally came from New York. He was born in Brooklyn. But then he came over to Chicago. We followed Johnny Torrio over there. The rest is history. But I'm going to get into a very interesting story, And I will say this, in all of the high-tech surveillance and all of the tools and weapons that the government has against the mob, they really do need witnesses. The surveillance stuff is good. The wiretap is good. Yes, by your own admission, you get yourself in trouble when you're caught on these tapes, unknowingly. But they need witnesses. And you got to say this, whether you like them or not, and certainly when I was in that life, I didn't like them. You got to give credit to these undercover agents that infiltrate the mob, the Joe Pistones of the world. This other guy, Garcia, I never met him, but, he was a pretty notable guy, infiltrated that life, went undercover, very successful. I was the subject of an undercover investigation with an agent by the name of Guerrero. He was on me for about 8 months. I didn't know it. He did his job well. Now, did it end up in any kind of an indictment or charges? No, because I was very careful just because he was somebody that I didn't know well. I didn't suspect him as being an agent, but I wasn't sure who he was. We actually became friends. So he did his job well. He was pulled off the assignment for another reason. I've told the story, we don't have to get into it. So I've had my own experience with an undercover FBI agent. And of course, Joe Pistone, the most famous of all times, I would say. Did he do his job well? Of course he did. The guy was undercover for 6 years. Nobody even suspected him. I think, it amounted in about 100 convictions later on. You know that whole story. Not going to go into it now. I met Joe once on the street, met him several times afterwards. I consider him a friend now. Some people may not like that from my former life, but hey, I always say this, Joe, you did your job better than we did ours. So how could we be mad? You were an FBI agent. That was your job. If we didn't suspect you, if we didn't snuff you out, it's not on you, it's on us. You did your job better than we did. But I didn't know that they were using undercover agents all the way back to Al Capone's time. And, why did the DNC thing stimulate, this thought in me? People, I want to tell you something. And again, I'm not going to get into the politics of it all. You know where I stand politically. And I think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama and Hakeem Jeffries and this whole corrupt crew, they're better than the mob. They're better financed. They have better tools and weapons. They're more deceptive. At the end of the day, they make more money. They do it in a way that they legitimize it. They pull the wool over our eyes for God knows how long, and they'll continue to do it. No question. Biden, come on. Biden is beating a RICO indictment that they won't even put against him that he deserves when he was peddling his office of the vice presidency. We also know he could be a convicted felon for what he did with the classified documents, but he was too, dementiated, to be brought to trial. That was the special counsel that said that, not me. That was the finding. So we know we got a criminal, basically, that's the president. They want to keep going after Trump, but that's the reality of it. His own special prosecutor said that. He had criminal liability there, but they left him alone. So anyway, so when I think of the DNC, when I think of those people, I think of the mob, and especially in Chicago. So in doing that, I kind of looked up something. I was looking up about Al Capone, and I saw something about this undercover agent that I think is very interesting. I didn't realize they had undercover agents way back when working that, same assignment that they're doing now, but very, very interesting. So I want to go into this story. And, you always think, you watch Elliot Ness, you watch The Untouchables, you thought it was Elliot Ness that brought him down. Not so. So let me read this to you. I think you'll get some enjoyment out of it. Always like to inform you about things you may not have known before. So this fella's name was Michael Malone. Now listen, I'm going to read this article, very interesting. In law enforcement, working as an undercover officer carries the high risk of discovery by criminal suspects. Absolutely. At any point in time, if somebody would have realized who Joe Pistone was, Donnie Brasco, he could have walked into something that would have been devastating. Maybe he would have got killed. Who knows what would have happened, but it wouldn't have been good. Leading to violence, torture, and death. In some countries, yes. If you're known to be an undercover agent and they find you in Mexico, you're done. Forget it. But the rewards can be huge. Obviously, prosecutions with wire recordings and eyewitness testimony that can result in arrests and convictions. We saw that, obviously, with Joe Pistone and Jack Garcia. A trained officer knows how to strategize with the confidence of their targets and get them to reveal what it's needed to build a case to take it to trial. And that's the bottom line. Yeah, you're getting intelligence, but you want to build a case that you can take to trial and possibly get a conviction. It requires an unusual kind of person, I would say so, able to work under stress, stay focused, pull off the character he or she is playing, and be prepared to tell many lies. Obviously, you saw the movie Donnie Brasco, which is only a little, hint of what really went on. But you saw what Joe Pistone had to sacrifice, his family and everything else. And there's a lot of truth to that. So you got to be a different kind of person to be able to go undercover like that. It's almost like acting in a way, but the consequences could be very severe. Michael Malone had all the makings of an undercover agent who would successfully infiltrate Al Capone's Chicago gang for nearly 2 years. He was undercover nearly 2 years. Malone, whose parents came over from Ireland, he was an Irish guy, grew up in New Jersey and meshed well with his European immigrants, eventually learning to speak Gaelic, Italian, Yiddish, and Greek. So he spoke 4 languages. With his black Irish dark hair and skin, he resembled someone from Southern Europe, and after finessing his way into Capone's inner circle in 1929, Malone proved invaluable to his superiors in the Treasury Department, pursuing a tax evasion case against the Chicago crime boss. Despite the danger, Malone kept an iron will. Blowing his cover would have proved fatal, but given his skills, it didn't happen. Now, let me explain something to you. Possibly Donnie Brasco, Joe Pistone wouldn't have gotten killed. We didn't kill FBI agents. Hands off. I'm in Italy now, but the mob in Italy, different story. Here, in the United States rather, we didn't kill agents. But back in Capone's day, they killed everybody. So it would have been very dangerous for him. He probably would have gotten killed if they would have found out who he was. While Malone kept up the charade, he delivered information that proved incriminating not only for Capone, but for his top enforcer, Frank Nitti, aka Nitto. Malone remained disguised within Capone's bootlegging band, even for a time after the feds filed tax charges against Capone. Nitti and Capone's brother, Ralph, in 1931. Those were the tax charges they filed against all 3. Now, it's interesting that where did they go? They didn't have RICO back then. The FBI wasn't really the FBI at that point in time. What did they do? They went to the IRS, always trying to follow the money. It's always the IRS. They're always on you, those agents. The unfortunate thing is they're on legitimate people now who don't pay their taxes. Man, the IRS, terrible agency in my point of view. The authority and the power that they have over our lives. Do we realize that everything is taxed? And they want to continue to raise our income tax, but everything is taxed. The food that we eat, the clothes that we wear, the gasoline that we put in our car, the cars that we buy, the houses that we buy, everything is taxed. Our funerals, everything is taxed. And they want to keep raising taxes on us. That's the power, the strength that the federal government has given the IRS. Terrible. When Capone's jury trial commenced and the Treasury Department removed Malone from his undercover job, remember, it wasn't Elliot Ness. It was Malone that did this. The agent gained a bit of respect from the embarrassed gang chief himself, Capone. In the Chicago courthouse, Malone happened to enter an elevator where Capone stood with his defense lawyers. The only thing that fooled me, this is a quote from Capone, the only thing that fooled me was your looks. Capone is said as to have remarked to Malone, "You look like a wop," quote, "You took your chances, and I took mine. I lost." And you know what? I give Capone credit for saying that. Dead, who am I to give him credit? But I give him credit because exactly what I said before. What he said to him, "You did your job better than I did mine. I should have known who you were. I didn't. You did your job better. No hard feelings." Of course, you didn't like him, but you can't get mad. When they do their job and they're doing their job better than ours, hey, these people took an oath to lock us up. We took an oath, that if we had to leave our own parents, we would leave our own parents, to go and answer to the mob. So, you got to give him credit for that. From 1929 to 1931, Malone fed intelligence about Capone that would culminate in the historic conviction of the nation's most notorious mob boss, who again, wasn't Elliot Ness, it was Michael Malone. His fascinating story began after his service in World War I. With law enforcement his career goal, Malone joined the Treasury Department's Intelligence Unit, later known as the T-Men. Early on in the 1920s, Malone appreciated how donning disguises brought him closer to the suspect. He posed in everyman roles such as garbage man and shoe shiner. These guys will do anything to get close to the suspect. Now listen to this. President Hoover entered office in March of 1929, a few weeks following the infamous St. Valentine's Day massacre in Chicago that obviously was ordered by Capone, where 7 men associated with Capone's bitter rival in bootlegging, George Bugs Moran, died in gunfire. Hoover conferred with the head of the T-Men and urged him to compile a team of special agents to, quote, get Capone on tax charges. So this does come down from the president. So when we hear that president had nothing at all to do with telling his Justice Department to go after Trump or any of Trump's people, you know what I have to say? That BS. Biden knew everything. He was the one that instructed, the Justice Department, hey, go after this guy, get this guy out of the way. Probably thought he couldn't beat him legit, So let's go after everything we could do. The first time in the history of our country, unprecedented, that a president had the nerve to go after a former president because he couldn't beat him. And we knew that he couldn't beat him at the polls. So yes, the president does have authority over the Department of Justice. Did it back then. He ordered the Treasury Department, get Capone. And I believe Biden said the same thing, get Trump. Meanwhile, another team of Prohibition Unit agents in Chicago, headed by Elliot Ness, would attack Capone in violations of federal liquor laws under the Volstead Act. So how did Malone start to infiltrate Capone's gang? This is very interesting here, what he did. Malone said about infiltrating Capone's underworld at its core at the Lexington Hotel, where the boss and his men lived. Wearing a fancy suit, a purple shirt and white hat, Malone sat in the lobby reading newspapers for days on end. He spoke in an Italian accent, introduced himself as Mike Lepido, met Capone men playing craps, and played the part of a mobster. He mailed letters to friends in Philadelphia who wrote back. Capone's guys broke into his room. They wanted to check him out. Noted his pricey checkered suits and silk underwear. They opened his mail from Philadelphia. They read the letters written impressively in underworld lingo they understood, and they informed Capone. Well, my friends, Michael Franzese here, and I am very excited to introduce to you all our non-alcoholic wine. Really excited and proud about this because I'll tell you why. Our process is a little bit different. This is real wine. It's not grape juice. It goes through the normal process of fermentation and everything else that wine goes through. An amazing process, by the way. I love sitting down and listening to these sommeliers that are really knowledgeable about the process of winemaking. It's amazing. So we get a bottle of wine, and then in the end we boil the wine and remove the alcohol, so the taste of the wine is still there. Tried it myself many times. We have both a semi-sweet and a dry wine, and it's really terrific. And I think all of those of you that don't want to drink wine but want to hold that glass and enjoy something that tastes just as good, maybe even better to some of you, this is it. Non-alcoholic wine, Franzese brand, one of a kind, first online, and then you'll be able to get it in markets throughout the country. This is really an offer that you shouldn't refuse, and I think this is going to be so appealing to all those of you out there who want the real taste of wine and want the enjoyment of having a glass of wine with your family, but not getting maybe some of the side effects that alcohol will do for you sometimes. So pick it up, non-alcoholic wine, Franzese brand. Again, I always give you an offer that you shouldn't refuse. So what they did, they wasn't too sure about this guy. They break into his hotel room. They see, he was all decked out in mob garb. He had it hanging in the closet, stuff that mobsters would wear. He checked the letters. This guy was smart enough to send letters to Philadelphia and use mob lingo and get letters back from his friends. He probably prepared them all. So they checked him out in every which way, and they went and told Capone, hey, he's legit. He's on the level. Finally, Capone sent a cohort down to the lobby to ask Lepido, which was his name, about his business in town. Keeping quiet, Malone replied in his Italian inflection. In the coming days over drinks, Malone told the guy he was on the lam for burglary in Philadelphia. Remember, he wrote letters to Philadelphia. It showed that that's where his origin was. That got Malone invitations to play poker and trade gossip with the gang, then have dinner at their hangout, the New Florence, and then to attend the birthday party Capone planned for Frank Nitti at the Lexington. Big time. Now he's going to be around everybody. Frank Nitti's birthday party. Malone and Capone met at Nitti's party. The secret agents' new acquaintances included Big Shot Hoods, Nitti, Machine Gun Jack McGurn, Jack Greasy Thumb Guzik, Paul the Waiter Rika, Murray the Camel Humphreys, and Sam Golfbag Hunt. Our names were never that original. Malone was in. He met everybody during that time. So you see what he did. He set it all up intelligently, man. He knew what he was doing. Got to give him credit. So he discreetly phoned Wilson, his boss, about what he'd overheard within the gang. Wilson and his aides traced signatures on bank checks while pursuing tax evasion cases against Nitti and Guzik. A federal court in Chicago convicted Guzik, who got a 5-year sentence, but Nitti skipped town. Malone, assigned to find him, followed Nitti's wife to an apartment building in Berwyn, Illinois, and there the cops nabbed Nitti, later sentenced to 18 months in prison for tax evasion. Now, you got 5 years, you got 18 months. Today, under the RICO statute, we get 20 years. 5 years, 18 months, okay. 20 years under RICO, people lost their mind. Then the police pinched Al himself following his 1931 indictment on tax charges. Mike Lapito was there at the Lexington when Al Capone arrived back, triumphant about his release on $50,000 bail. Malone listened and reported to Wilson about Capone's scheme to bribe and fix the jury in his favor. The feds moved quickly, and a judge created a new list of jurors. We saw this in the Untouchables, where Capone thought he had the jury fixed, but then they found out about it. Malone seems to be the one that found out about it. They let the judge know, and the judge immediately put out a new list of jurors, foiled the plan. The feds moved quickly. A judge created a new list of jurors. Malone then reported Capone's plot to hire 5 gunmen from New York to kill 4 federal officials in Chicago, including Wilson. With safety measures in place, Capone ordered the gunmen to leave town. So this guy was a valuable informant, man, a valuable, I should say, undercover informant, undercover agent. Capone's trial, after a judge refused to plea bargain with the mob boss, started in October of 1931. He tried to take a plea. 4 days afterward, Malone finally gave up the act. The news spread fast to Capone and his men. Malone had heard that Philly DeAndrea, Capone's bodyguard, planned to bring a concealed gun into the courthouse. We saw that in the movie also. Malone and another agent frisked and disarmed DeAndrea and had him arrested. A jury Capone could not fix found the boss guilty on 22 criminal counts. The judge gave him 11 years in the federal pen and a $50,000 fine, plus court costs. Michael Malone, the undercover Treasury agent, very successful in really bringing Capone down. And people, you know what? Undercover agents are normally very effective. For some reason, we overlook them. We see how he did his job. And that was really the demise of Capone. I think a lot of people do think it was Elliot Ness. Wasn't. It was this guy, Michael Malone, and the Treasury Department that eventually got him convicted and gave him 11 years. And let me tell you something. 11 years ain't that bad either. You know, I got a 10-year sentence. We got through it. But today, you know, if you're in the mob, if you're a normal guy, you're not going to get that. But if you're in the mob, you're associated anyway, you're going to get 20 years, 25 years. Who knows what they want to pile on. Ridiculous. Treasury Department, you know, IRS, you know, tough organization, man. And, you know, one thing going after the mob, but going after legitimate people like they do for back taxes. And, you know, it's just, I don't even want to get into that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today. And people, as I didn't get into the politics, I really want to, but if you want to see me in the politics, please go to my Rumble platform, and you'll see me sounding off there. Because why? Because we have a very important election coming up, and I think it's my job, you know, to alert people as to what I know and to really get people to vote with their conscience and vote right this November. That's it for today, my friends. How do I leave you? Same way, never going to change. Be safe. You know how I stress that, especially you ladies. Be healthy. You know, it's amazing. In Italy, people eat everything they want. Nobody gets overweight. You know, it's all of Europe because the food is not processed. It's a real thing. You don't even feel that full after you eat. Be safe. Be healthy. God bless each and every one of you. And yes, I'll see you next time. Take care.